We're starting Be'ez Hashem Siman Pei Vav and Vayol Moshe. This is a very important siman because it slugs up one of the main arguments that the Tziyonim make. The most widespread one, in fact.
Which one is that?
We're going to see now. Take a look. V'yesh tipshim ha'oimrim. There's some foolish people who say Shiyan shahaya b'haskamas roiv ha'umais, that since the declaration of the state in 1948 was made with the agreement of most of the nations.
It was the UN. It wasn't like the country itself. It's just a group,
okay,
where politicians sit.
We're going to get to that.
Or somebody people decide.
Most of the countries, in fact, it was 2/3. They have to have a 2/3 majority in the General Assembly to declare something, to make a resolution. So, Yan Shahaya B'Haskamas Roiva Umais Ein Kan Loi Ister Shvua V'Loi Ister Havar Alakates. There's no Shvua and there's no transgression of the end, which the Rebbe explained throughout the Sefer, that it's not just the Shvua, it's also an Indian of the Chikas HaKetz, is an Indian of Kfira besides the Shvua. But none of those things apply since we're doing it with the permission of the nations. The Cholkach Gover HaChashchus, the darkness has prevailed so much, the Samiyu Swainayim, and the blindness of the eyes, Shenofal Alo Olam, that has fallen upon the world, Litois B'divrei Havalim Ka'elu. It's that people have gone and made a mistake about these issues, and they've fallen for this argument. V'hinei gam mashakasav ba'avnei nezer. So what's the answer to their argument? The answer is number one. Even what the Avnei Nezer says, ala shvua shelo yalu b'choyma, that there's three different shvuas that apply to the Medina. One is shvua shelo yalu b'choyma, one is shelo yimrudu, and one is shelo yidchaku esaketz. So in Siman Tezdayin, the Rebbe brought down the Avnei Nezer, who says that the shvua shelo yalu b'choyma, Rashi says b'yad chazaka, it means only with force, b'mechama.
That's what
the Rebbe said, right? So he said the Avnei Nezer does hold that way. He's a posek, so he's entitled to his opinion. He holds that it's only b'derech milchama. Gam mashakasav Avnei Nezer al shvua shelo yalu b'choyma she'apirish hu b'derech milchama sheloi b'reshus, that it means without permission. V'lokach zeh miloshen Rashi zal b'yad chazaka, and he derives this from Rashi. He only says it regarding one of the three oaths, which is not to go up as a wall.
Rebelling against the nation is different.
Right, rebelling against the nation, and the Chikas HaKetz is different. That's really the one that we're focusing on. Because rebelling against the nations, if the nations give you permission to do it, it's not called rebelling.
Yeah.
It depends who you're rebelling against. But if Luyitzur, that Ummah, that's the one in Eretz Yisrael, gives you permission to go and make a Medina, you're not being moired against them.
Yeah.
But you're being doichek haketz. That means any type of state. Going with immigration is one thing. A state is a separate thing. That's really the answer here. Yeah. That immigration with the permission of the ruling power is okay. Like the British gave permission, the Rebbe himself came under the British. But when it comes to making a state, it's a totally different story. That's the chikas haketz. That's going out of exile. So the Avnei Nezer loy amar zeh, he only said this ela ala shvua shelo yalu b'choyma, aval ala shvua hashlishis, the third oath shelo yidchu saketz, the one about forcing the end. Adrab because of Rashi's al dekoy al hamar b'tachanunim. We had that Rashi said it's going on davening excessively. Av she'eno eis shum pu'ula, even without any actions. Loy b'derech milchama, v'loy shum pu'ula cheres sheboilam. Not only warfare or force, but even quiet prayer in the corner is still lost there, according to Rashi. Because just the idea of forcing and hurrying up the redemption is chala hashvua. That's what the shvua goes on. The nations don't make a difference here. Because the point is that the Shelo Yalu B'Choyma, the Avnei Nezer understood it's a type of rebellion, not to go up against the will of the nations to go to Eretz Yisrael. Fine. So Zayin Azoi. But that's only by the Choyma. But when it comes to forcing the end, getting out of exile, it has nothing to do with the nations. It's our own Inyan. The Jewish people have an Inyan. They have to be in Galus. It's like the hospital that we're in, and we have to stay in there until our refuah is complete. We can't come out. So Hashem said, don't come out until it's over. So it has nothing to do with the nations and not, or whether it's with permission from them or not. Okay. V'halo yester mizeh kosev amaral. The Maharal goes even further and says, "Shaloi raki ma'umois maskimim chala hashvua." Not only if they agree to it, that to Eden going and making a Medina, the shvua is still in effect. Even if they force them with the threat of death, and even with threat of torture, still it's forbidden to transgress the oath. And all the more so when they're not forcing us, they're just giving us permission. It never occurred to any poisik in the world to be matter such a thing. Okay? Now, I brought here a sefer called Chidushe Basra by Reb Chaim Doiv Al-Tuski, one of the Rosh Yeshivas in Torah Or in Yerushalayim, and he writes here in Masechta Ksubas, in Pirush on Masechta Ksubas. So in the middle, at that last page, actually, he has a section on Vayol Moshe, and I have it here, page 13. Okay, he quotes the Rebbe that we just read, and he says like this: V'yesh la'ayin. That it could be we could disagree. Why? The l'chayr yesh loymar the chol hashvuas bein le'inyan lalos b'chayma. All the oaths have the same theme to them. Sai, the oath about going up as a wall, and the other oath of the chikas akates, it's all really the same theme. Now, what he means by the Marsha is the Marsha says that the Chayma is the Aliyah b'Chayma means going up to build the wall of Yerushalayim, which he learns means making a forceful entry into Yerushalayim and building it up like in a military defense. So he puts that together with the Avnei Nezer Shita that it means B'derech Milchama. And the second one is not to rebel. The shaloi lahabos b'tachanunim, which is tichikas akates. Heim le'inyan shaloi lasa shum ishtadlus lahashlich ola galus minal tzavarehem. That the whole idea of all these oaths is not to throw off the galus from our necks. The tzrichim lahamtin l'bias Mashiach. We have to wait for the coming of Mashiach. The rak oz yavir Hashem shibu malchias. Only when Mashiach comes, Hashem is going to take away the shibu malchias. So far, I think everybody agree with that statement. Now he says this. Listen to this. Therefore, if you don't go with a strong hand with war, but you go with the Reshus HaGoyim, then loy avru al shum shvua ha'aseres merida. They didn't transgress any shvua that asers rebellion, and all the oaths are really asering rebellion according to him, because kiven the mekaimim ham machazkim, they fulfill and they strengthen the shlitas hagoyim, the rulership of the nations over us. Why? Because we have to ask permission. Why didn't the Tzion just go make a Medina? Why didn't Ben Gurion just say, who cares about the UN? I mean, he said that later, so he should have said that in 1948 too. He should have said, who cares? UN, Shmuel, who cares? We're making a Medina now, right? Elamai. No, he waited till they had a 2/3 majority and a resolution, and he said, okay, now we have permission. Oh, so you see, the fact that you're nichna, that you're being humble before them and you're asking for their permission, that shows that you're still in Galus. Even after the establishment of the state and you're in Eretz Yisrael, you still muchrachim him las kamas umos al kol shal v'shal.
How can it be if they're independent already?
So once I'm getting to that. So he says, even after they have an independent state, they still have to ask permission before they do things. You see, the Israelis, they come to the UN constantly, say, okay, we want to
have no political power.
Or they come, okay, so they come to America. There's always meetings every year.
America still doesn't tax Israel. Bottom line, I'd have to give money to Israel.
That's true.
Tax Israel.
And if once in a while they do something that's against the nation's will, like
America won't attack Israel if they do something they don't like. Believe me.
Well, one time there was a Havamina. Listen, not attack, but they distanced themselves.
Right, they won't attack. It's different.
Yeah, okay. In 1956, in the Sinai campaign, they Israelis invaded Sinai, and British and French came with a plan that they made in advance to separate the combatants because the British wanted back the Suez Canal from Nasser. So Eisenhower got involved and he said basically, get out of the Sinai right now or else there's going to be consequences.
Oh, he threatened to attack Israel?
No, but he said the Russians did threaten to attack, so they looked to America for their support in the Cold War situation, and America said, no, we're not going to support you if you don't get out right now. So they got out.
Well, not support is different than attacking.
Right, it's different. But the point is that they had the permission from America, whatever they did. So he says, miyad, even if they sometimes go out of the will of the nations, miyad choizrim
under the power.
Miyad choizrim bibahala. They suddenly go back as soon as the nations tell them not. Al yidei garas hagoy, when the goy rebukes them. When it happened in the Sinai campaign. Now, so what's his premise here? He's trying to say that's Galus. If you have to listen to America or the UN or whatever, that's still Galus.
It's a very silly thing to say.
But every nation in the world basically has to listen to other nations. They can't just go on their own and be a rogue state because they're going to be ostracized. They're going to be sanctions against them. So every nation really has that today. We're not living in a world where
a country could say, I'm not going to give you these supplies if you don't do this for me. We'll import supplies to you. It's anything.
Right, so basically every country has that situation. That's not Galus. Galus means when you're living under other nations.
And have no land of your own.
Right. But
it's not enough. There are minority groups in every country. It's a natural course of events that people travel and leave their country. But the difference is all these groups have their country. That's the difference. That's why if you ask, let's say a minority Russian group, would you be able to recognize yourself as Russian? If there were no Russians, tell you no, we can't. The only power that gives them the power to be recognized minority Russians is their land.
Right.
Seriously.
So that's the difference.
Even if you ask minority,
that's the difference between Galus and Gula.
Even if you ask minority Chinese who openly.
So Bekitzer, what he says is not really has no svara to it, because why should it be considered Galus?
Or Zionist.
What?
Or Sameach, I don't like them. They're like H-style place.
Okay.
They're kind of like H or Sameach, that much different. They're viewed like H.
Let's go weiter now. Yeah. Okay. Gam v'oisa hashvua, even in the oath, shelo yalu b'choyma, that the oath is not going up as a wall. Shehevin be'avnei nezer milashon Rashi zal shekasa biyad chazaka shapir shu b'derech milchama. So he's saying, up to now I talked about shelo yidchaku as a case. So that the avnei nezer was never matir. But even the one that he was matir, which is the shelo yalu b'choyma, and he understood from Rashi that going up as a wall means going as a war, b'derech milchama. So kvar biarti ba'arichus she'en kein das hapoiskim rishonim b'achronim. I explained already in the early simanim of the sefer, in siman yud up till siman chaf, that this is not the shita of most poiskim rishonim nachronim. Ubiarti lashon Rashi zalbaz. I explained Rashi differently, that yad chazaka means forcefulness with not war, but forcefulness with like asking a lot and hafsaras dvarim, other things, but not war.
No, I think the grasping on there to show up very strongly.
Okay, v'gam zeh vadai bar. Now comes the crucial part here. V'gam zeh bar. Even if you're going to go like the Avnei Nezer, but it's clear shemasha havin b'Avnei Nezer, that the Avnei Nezer learned up meloshin biyad chazaka, from the words biyad chazaka of Rashi shapirish b'derech milchama. He explained it to mean warfare. V'chadoyma hakavana ala umma hayosheves sham. It means war against the nation that lives in Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't mean that you have to have permission from some other nation somewhere else. So, that the Avnei Nezer held that if you have to fight against that nation in Eretz Yisrael, vaday dehavi biyad chazaka. That's yad chazaka. But if that nation there gives you permission, all right, then you could do it. Then you could come in. However, the fact that other nations maskimim, that they agree to it, that doesn't help at all. That doesn't make a difference. Din Sanhedrin. And now he's bavorning. He's saying maybe you're gonna come with a taina that maybe in a Chanami, not the nations in Eretz Yisrael weren't maskim, but other nations were. So the miut, the minority of the UN is batal in the roiv somehow. That's what he probably.
You're going like a basic. He decide.
So he says, "Yesh le'uma is din Sanhedrin." Do the nations have such a din, like a Sanhedrin ladun ma yasu Yisrael al pi roiv deish b'neim, that they could, with the majority of them, they could decide what the Jews should do. Haloyaf b'dinehem dinei b'nei Noach. Even as far as the Goyim's own halachas of b'nei Noach, kasvu primogadim v'anoy behuda v'oid kama poiskim deloy shaykh bohem. Now let's say a Goy Shebezdin gets together and they want to pass him whether a certain thing is considered avodah zara or
but we don't care.
Ritzicha, So, but for them, they have to know whether this is Ritzicha or not. They have to keep the halachas of b'nei Noach. So if they have a din, let's say they have a bezdin of 3 and 2 of them say, yeah, it's Ritzicha, and the other one says it's not.
Yeah.
So are you going to say, Achrei Rabbim Lahatos?
No.
So they say no. By going, there's no din of Achrei Rabbim Lahatos. They have to be unanimous. Now, what do you have to do in the end? I don't know. I mean,
well, Gemara does tell us that a guy can be osik in his own mitzvahs. That's the part of his own mitzvahs.
Right. But what do you do when you have a suffix about it? How do you decide such a thing? So he says, Kivan Shehu Din Medinei HaTorah. Since going after the Rabbim is one of the Torah's dinim, Shaloi Nitna El Yisrael was only given to the Jews. So the Goyim don't have a right to use the din of a majority.
Right.
And Mikol Shekain B'Dinei Yisrael.
And there's no din of a guy being a chacham, who going to have to follow who decides the law.
And Mikol Shekain B'Dinei Yisrael Shetzarech Lazeh Das Torah Amitis. All the more so the paskin on halacha, you need to have das Torah, so the Goyim can't paskin on halacha. Shafil kol u'mash mikol olam yachad. Even if all the nations would all agree, lo yuchlu lachri avziz kol shu b'das Torah. They couldn't change anything about the Torah. They couldn't decide anything. U'vagoyim mein Torah. The Goyim don't have Torah. Now, obviously, we're not talking about Torah here. We're talking about a mitzias, whether the Goyim have a right to, whether they're giving us permission or not. So you have, like, say, 38 nations giving us permission, and another 12 or 13, whatever it was, not giving us permission. So the question was who to follow, right? So that's not a question of law, it's a question of the mitzias, whether they give permission or not. Right. But he's making a point that there's no such thing as a roiv deciding something by the Goyim. Okay. Now I want to point out here another thing here. Well, let's just finish the paragraph and then I'll say it afterwards. V'im ne'ema b'das Rashi zal, if we're going to learn Pshat and Rashi, that when Rashi says not to go with a strong hand, that it only means going without permission, but with permission it's mutter. So you would have to learn Pshat, that the Torah was makpid that we shouldn't do it by force. It's like the same idea as the other shvur, not to rebel. The Torah was makpid not to rebel against the nation you're living under. So if you're living under America, let's say, you can't rebel against America. There's nothing to do with other nations in the world. So that's his point here. He says, "V'im kol shar ha'umay shebachol ha'olam yoimru liYisrael." Let's say all the nations of the world say, "You American Jews, make a revolution against America." There would not be a heter to do such a thing. Limroid, to rebel against the country you're living in, because given the soif he married. That's in practical aspects.
What some people say.
Intents and purposes, that is rebellion. So there's no difference if the other nations were matter you to do it.
Yes, some have a premise that if everybody had a gun in their house, they'll be able to scare off the government and become a dictatorship. But that's silly. The government's going to be afraid of a pistol. Believe me. I'm serious. You're not going to scare the government away with a pistol because they have hardcore weapons and hardcore ways of deflecting your pistol. You hear what I'm saying?
Right.
So something they need to be prepared, but you don't need to, because the government's got much tougher than that.
Okay, so therefore, just like if the other nations in the world would tell us to rebel against the nation we're living under, that would not make a heter to be moirid, because it's still merida. So the same way, if Aliyah B'Choyma is a type of merida, going to Eretz Yisrael against the Rishus of whatever nation rules Eretz Yisrael, that's merida. So if the nations in the rest of the world come and say, yeah, you can do it, that doesn't help. You have to have that nation. That's what the Torah forbade. U'kamoy kain hu ba'aliyah Eretz Yisrael. The same idea with immigration to Eretz Yisrael. The imhu aliyah hu al kopanim b'yad chazaka. If this immigration is done by force, ein b'koyach kol shar umois lahatir. The other nations of the world don't have a right to be matir it. Zehu davar pasha dubara. That's an obvious thing after the fidas ho Avnei Nezer, even according to the Avnei Nezer.
Wow. So
the point I wanted to make here is like this. In 1948, for the first part of the year, they were before April 15th. Was it May 15th actually? Before May 15th, they were fighting against the local militias, the local bands, Abdul Qadir al-Husseini and a few other people that were fighting in the land itself. Then, starting after May 15th, there was an invasion of Egypt and Iraq and Syria and Jordan. Jordan didn't really invade.
All these weapons are all planned in advance.
So the point I'm saying is that the nations that they were fighting weren't the nations that ruled over Eretz Yisrael, because in the beginning of 1948 they fought Palestinian militias, the people who didn't really rule Eretz Yisrael. They were just citizens of the country.
Yeah, it was under
people
England.
Who lived. It was under England. Once England left on May 15th, then they were fighting against countries from the outside. They were fighting against Egypt and Iraq and Syria. They weren't fighting against the country that ruled Eretz Yisrael. So you could tie over here that what the Rebbe says, the Rebbe is saying that you have to have permission from the Ummah HaYoshevet Sham. Well, there was no Ummah HaYoshevet Sham at the time, because after the British left, British were the Ummah HaYoshevet Sham, but the British didn't give it to anybody. They left. So who was the Ummah HaYoshevet Sham from the time of the British leaving until onwards? Nobody. There were people who lived there, but they weren't ruling it, and there were countries from the outside who invaded, but they weren't really ruling it either. So what's going on over here?
The Zionists saw it as a major advantage. The mandate was there over the Ottoman Empire, because the mandate was destined.
So what I want to say here is that Yad Chazaka B'derech Milchama means any kind of Milchama. It doesn't make a difference who you're fighting against. If you're fighting a war to get Eretz Yisrael, it doesn't make a difference if you're fighting against other nations from outside or from people who don't have a country yet. You're fighting a war, it's B'derech Milchama. The only thing that could be matir, according to Avnei Nezer, is the reshus of the nation that lives there. But there was no such thing. The nation that lived there was the British, and they took it and they were mafkir it. They said, Kol Alam Var, basically. They said, whoever gets it first can get it. And they didn't help anybody. They left. In fact, they for the beginning, they were helping out the Transjordanian army. Then, then they stopped.
And all these women have black markets, most of them.
Right. But the point is that they didn't give it to anybody. So since they didn't give it to anybody, you don't have reshus, nor of us, you have like a situation of hefker. So when something is hefker and different people come to grab it, and there's a war over that thing, so that's b'derech milchama according to Avnei Nezer. It doesn't matter if the Ummah HaYoshevet Sham is fighting you or some other nation is fighting you. The point is that it's b'derech milchama.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's take a look at the last paragraph of the Rav Al-Tuski, the Chiddushei Basra.
Yeah.
He goes back, he says the same time again on this part. He says, V'gam yesh la'ayin b'dechilu. We have to be ma'ayin with fear, with trembling. Basically, he's not so sure about what he's saying, but he says, B'ha'aras ha'sefer Vayol Moshe, against what the Vayol Moshe says in this section that I just read now. Sham v'zel l'shoynoi. V'gam bar shemasha havim b'avnei nezer me'lashon hayad b'yad v'zaka. Okay, he quotes the whole thing that I read. I'm skipping ahead now. He says, "Im nema the ikar ha'akpada haisa shelo yashlichu ola galus." That the point of all this shuas was not to throw off the exile, ushlitas hagoyim miyat savar, not to throw out the rulership of the nations. Zesh tzrichim adayim haskamas roiv umais roiv hagoyim. This is that you need the permission of most of the nations. Afshem mordim be'echad mehem, even though they're still rebelling against one of them. Adayin Mikri the Shruim Heim Begalus. It's still called that they're in Galus. The Shlitas Acherim Aleim, because they have to listen to other nations. This is his same story he was saying before. Ubefrat Lafi Lashon Rashi's album Madur Kamahu Beshita. The Rashi brought down by the Shittim Mekubetzis. Rashi says Hoister Hu Lasos Mei Lehem, to do it by themselves. Imken Kishoisim Rakbas Komas Roiv Umois. So if they're not doing it by themselves, doing it because the nations gave them permission. Ein Zeh Nichla Basias Mei Lehem V'Loi Nesar. It's not called by themselves. But again, I'm saying that this is not right, because when something is you're going up with permission from nations, when you're making a state and you're becoming independent, that's not galus. It doesn't make a difference if you have to ask their permission or not. Not galus.
Yeah.
Galus is like the Gemara says, "Ein bein olam azeli moisem mashiach el shiva malchus bilvad."
Yes.
So shiva malchus means living under the malchus. Doesn't mean living in your own independent state and having to reckon with what the malchus say.
Yeah.
Okay, now the last paragraph in the Siman. Ella she'af ma she'oimrim. Even this that the Tzionim claim, shahaya ba'achlatas roiv ha'amim, that it was with the permission of most of the nations. Gam zeh sheker. Even that's a sheker. Even the fact that the UN gave permission is sheker. Why? Ki b'yeshivo ha'achroina, that in the last meeting of the UN, that they should have approved of the partition plan, according to the UN regulations, nidcha davar, they rejected it. Vehechlitu limsor Eretz Yisrael lidei kesher eza amin manikra trusteeship. That they changed their mind, they decided not to make a partition plan, and they decided to give over Eretz Yisrael. The British didn't want to rule anymore, so they decided we're going to give it over to a UN trusteeship.
Yeah, that was all part of England, expiring, after the creation of man due to conquering the Ottoman Empire in World War I.
So Ella Shatziyonim lo yischashvu im achlatas ha'amim. The Tzionim didn't listen to this last decision. But lo yitziyasu lahem. They didn't pay attention to it. Okay. Now to explain this, just take a look. You can really look at any history book. But I just picked one. It's Alan Hart's book, The False Messiah.
Zionism, Real Enemies, Volume 1?
Yeah, Volume 1, right.
Yeah.
So, he says like this, Marshall, who was the...
Who's Marshall?
Marshall was the Secretary of State.
At the time. All right.
Got his first name right now.
Okay.
But Marshall's cable. He sent a telegram to Truman. So he said, included a working draft of the procedures to be followed. They included a discussion in the Security Council which would be led by Senator Warren Austin, America's ambassador to the UN. If discussion proved that the Security Council was unable to implement the partition plan, the intention thereafter was that Austin, on instruction, would make a statement calling for the Palestine problem to be referred back to the General Assembly, introducing a draft U.S. resolution to replace the shelved partition resolution for a temporary trusteeship for Palestine under the Trusteeship Council of the UN.
So what was the actual decision in the end?
So that was the decision. You're going to see. I'm going to go ahead. So Truman approved of it. Truman's reply to Marshall on 22nd of February was short and to the point. Your working draft of the recommended basic position for the Security Council discussion received. I approve in principle this basic position. Because the background here is that from the beginning of 48 until this point, there was fighting going on. There were Zionist militias running around the country, kicking people out, killing people, and there was bombings.
Yeah, they claim it was a Yeshua.
So,
there's so much death happened through.
So the point is that with all this going on, they realized the partition plan was not going to happen peacefully. They weren't going to just agree to it and just make peace. So the UN said, what are we going to do? Either we have to implement it by force, meaning send down a UN force with soldiers to actually enforce it.
Do you want to do that? Do you actually have soldiers?
They have a theoretical right to do it. They don't have their own soldiers.
But they can suggest.
They can have the countries in the Security Council contribute forces, or they can say, no, we can't implement partition, we can't force them to do it, because they don't want to do it themselves. So we're just going to take it back and think of a different plan. So that's basically what they said. On March 2nd, Austin went through the motions of submitting a draft U.S. resolution calling upon the Security Council to do everything it can under the Charter to give effect to the partition recommendation of the General Assembly. In other words, see how much you can do. And he says, at issue behind closed doors was whether or not the UN had the legal authority to use force to implement the partition plan. The Security Council was divided on the matter. There was a dispute whether they could use force to implement it, and decided on March 5th not to put it to a vote. With Truman opposed to the creation of international force for Palestine, the discussion was anyway academic, because Truman wasn't going to commit any U.S. troops to go to Palestine and enforce it. Okay? Yeah. So that was the situation in February, 2nd of March. Then, I'm skipping the whole story about Eddie Jacobson. The Zionists had to get Weizmann into the White House, and they couldn't, because Truman didn't want to see Weizmann, so they sent in...
Who's Weizmann?
Chaim Weizmann, the Zionist leader.
When was he American?
No, he was.
How was the White House then?
British, but he was in America at the time, and he wanted to see Truman to try to convince him to change his mind.
Oh, right.
So Truman didn't want to see him. So
Truman, it's a shame, and John Boehner wanted to actually agree to see Netanyahu. It was a shame.
So the Truman had an old friend named Eddie Jacobson, who was a Jew, and he was a Zionist. So they decided to send him in to get Truman to agree to see Weizmann. So he went in, and the president said, it's a very funny story. He said to him, Eddie, I'll talk to you anytime you want, but I don't want to hear a word about the Zionism in Palestine. Nothing about
Zionists will not like this fact. And really, Zionists, if they heard this fact, they'd probably curse Truman out more than Obama. You know what's funny? I did hear from Zionists that Obama's worse than Haman.
Okay. So he tells the story here that Eddie came in, he talked about other things, but he started crying in the middle. So Truman said, Eddie Jacobson, this Jewish friend. So Truman
was he American too? Or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So he said, why are you crying? So then he said, I think about the homeless Jews who are waiting thousands of years for a state, and I think about Weizmann, and I'm crying. And Truman said, okay, that's enough, Eddie. That's the last word. Don't think more about this.
So in the end, after they voted for Palestine,
they didn't make it, but they decided to make it. Take a look. The next day,
trusteeship? What do you mean?
The trusteeship is that it's not going to go to anybody in the meantime until we can make peace. Until we can find a way to make a peaceful partition, it's going to be under the mandate, not similar to a mandate, but it's more temporary.
Right.
There'll be a trustee. One nation will be picked as the trustee, whoever it is, whether it's British or Americans. And they'll watch over it until they're ready to find a peaceful solution. The next day, 19th of March, Ambassador Austin delivered his statement calling for the shelving of the partition resolution and the convening of another special session of the General Assembly to work out a new solution to the Palestine problem. The one the U.S. would propose, Austin indicated, was temporary UN trusteeship. The Zionists denounced Austin's statement as a shocking reversal of the U.S. position. Okay? And then a couple pages later, I have that Truman gave a press conference, and he said, "This country vigorously supported the plan for partition with economic union recommended by the UN Special Committee on Palestine and by the General Assembly. We have explored every possibility consistent with basic principles of the UN Charter for giving effect to that solution. Unfortunately, it has become clear that partition plan cannot be carried out at this time by peaceful means. We could not undertake to impose this solution on the people of Palestine by use of American troops, both on charter grounds and as a matter of national policy." So basically, we're not going to make partition happen by force. So therefore, we have to shelve the partition plan. Okay, so that's the... And now what happened was, they shelved it, but the Zionim declared the state anyway. Weiter, okay, in Vayel Moshe. Ubefrat, okay, you got the place?
Yes.
Ubefrat, especially Masha Lakhu Yerushalayim. This that the Zionists took Yerushalayim, that was from the beginning to the end against all the nations. None of the nations in the UN ever gave them permission to do that. The Ein Laharich Bozek Klal.
Yerushalayim was not included in the vote of the UN.
Yeah, so I have the map here, page 12 of the Mar Mekomis. This is the partition plan map. And as you can see, the West Bank is it's not just the West Bank of today. It's much, much bigger, and goes almost out to the coast. And Yerushalayim is one little circle way in the middle of the West Bank, way in the middle of the Palestinian state. Mm-hmm. And the UN had specified that Yerushalayim and the whole area around it should be an international zone, a UN under the UN supervision. Okay.
Zionists don't do it.
Right, so that from the beginning, Ben Gurion already said, from the first day of the war, take Yerushalayim. And by the way, the Transjordanian King Abdullah, had decided by the beginning of the war that he wasn't going to invade any part of the state that was the other half, the 55% that the UN gave to the Zionim. He decided he wasn't going to take that. He already checked with the British, and they said, yeah, don't take that. Just take the part that's on the Palestinian side that the UN gave to the Arabs. Jordan could take that. I mean, the UN didn't say that, but the British silently gave them the permission to do that. So they said, okay, we're going to do that, but not Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim was supposed to be an international zone. So they didn't even come to fight in Yerushalayim. The Jordanian army was the only serious army that they faced in 1948. All the other armies were almost nothing. And the Jordanian army had British officers in it. Had John Glubb and everything, and they had no intention of coming to Yerushalayim until the Tzionim came. Once the Tzionim came, then they said, okay, now we're going to come. All right. So the Ein Laharich was that klal. We don't need to go on about this. It doesn't make a difference, because even if the Umas would have been Matir Yerushalayim, like we said, it doesn't help. And going back to what he said at the beginning of the Siman, that the third Shvuah, Shal Techikas HaKetz, no person, no Poisik, no Rishon Achron, nobody ever said Shehu Tali B'Shusa Umais, that this should be dependent on the permission of the Umais. Okay? And now he says like this. What would be the Havamina to say it's Tali and B'Shusa Umais? What would be such a Havamina? You'd say let's say like Rav Altusky, that asking permission is a galus to Kazakh, right? And when the Geula comes, then we're going to go without asking permission. So he said like this: in a Chanami, that part is true, that when the Geula comes, there's not going to be any Rishus Umais. We're going to go to a Madrega that's so high, that's out of Galus, that we're going to be so independent, we won't have to ask permission. He says, in a Chanami, Kishiyavar Mashiach Tzidkenu, Lo Yishal es Pi Umais. Mashiach won't have to ask the Umais what to do, because he doesn't need Rishus from them. Elahem Kulam Yishalu es Melech HaMashiach Kedas Malasois. Adrabah, they're going to recognize him, and they're going to come and ask him what to do. That the Umas will all come to listen to him. He goes even more at length than Yigeres Teman. But to go and take any kind of freedom, and he's bavoring Rav Altusky's kasha. You see, he thought of all the things people are going to say later. He bavored them all. So he says, even to take a type of cherus that's not on the madrega of Mashiach. Mashiach's going to go even against the Ummah.
Yeah, the Chazal says we could have had such a redemption inside of the madrega of Mashiach. Yeah. He said we don't want it. We only want to be clear to our redemption is here, like it will, like not like Moshe even, when there were still doubts.
So therefore, even to take such a type of geula that's lower than the geula of Mashiach, even that's aser. Be'ez oifen shu hu iser ayim menoyer. Ve'af l'moishu l'haron, even when Moshe and Aaron came to Mitzrayim, even kol ha'moifsim shalhem, even with all the miracles they did, lo hayu rishayim laham min begula. The Jews weren't allowed to believe them. That this is the gula. Terem sheshamu hasimin animster mi'avosenu. Before they heard them say pekoi pekadti, which is the siman that they received by tradition, that would be what the Goyal would say. Kasher vesi le'el midivrei Chazal. Like I brought before, that Chazal say that Serach Bas Asher was the one who knew that and had asked him. Right.